Your number one goal as a guitarist, especially if you're serious about your music, should be to develop a signature tone. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 methods on how you can develop your own signature guitar tone, and some of these methods are probably a little unorthodox and it may actually contradict what we're trying to do here, but don't worry, I'll explain. Number 1 method to developing your own signature guitar tone is stop obsessing over tone. No, dude, I'm seriously, or dudette. I know those girls, plenty of female guitar players who are awesome, by the way. Dudes and dudettes, stop obsessing over guitar tone. Stop obsessing over amp tone and tone in general. And there's a couple reasons why. So number 1 reason why is because tone, the search for tone, is just something that we go through as guitar players and musicians alike. You know, we're always trying to find that perfect sound. Let me ask you this question. How many times have you gotten this new amp or new plugin or whatever it may be? You work with it for like 10 days or 52 days or whatever. I'm just making up numbers. And then you're like, finally, I found this perfect tone. Then you come back 2 days later and you're like, I need a better tone. You're still tweaking with the thing, trying to get that sought after perfect tone that really just does not exist. It's like pie in the sky. Although I wish I had some pie right here. The second reason you should stop obsessing over tone is obsessing over tone will actually hinder you from developing your own signature tone. And here's why. Because your signature tone really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the amp, the guitar, you know, or the effects or whatever. I mean, yeah, some of that you have to take into account, of course, but your true signature tone is going to come from your hands, right? These. And it's just the way you play. Think of guitar players like Joe Satriani. He hits a note, you know it's him. It doesn't matter what amp he's playing through. Think of another great example here is Slash, you know, from Guns N' Roses. As soon as he hits one note, and I think he's probably one of the guitar players that's nailed this the most. When he hits that one note, it's like, okay, that's Slash. Now, he could probably play that one note on any guitar through any amp. You're still going to know it's him, right? And just think of other countless guitar players that maybe you're like really big fans of, and think about when they play a note, it's like, okay, I know exactly who that is. And here's what obsessing over tone does. It takes away all of that time that you could truly be practicing your craft, your instrument, and really developing your signature tone, going through these next 4 steps, 4 methods that we're about to go through. So this is method 1 though. Do not obsess over tone, just stop it. Like seriously, cut it out. Number 2, this is the second method I'm going to give you to developing your own signature tone, and this is going to sound extremely contradicting to trying to develop your signature tone. I'm laughing because it's funny, but I'm going to say it, okay? Minimize your gear. Minimize the gear you use. And I'll go into why this is so important. Here's the thing, when you're constantly trying out new equipment, and this is especially true today with modern technology, we have like all of these just amazing plugins and amp simulators and cabinet sims and blah, blah, blah. All this stuff's right at our fingertips, no pun intended. And it can be overwhelming, you know, and technology has made it possible just to have all these options. But what happens is it's really hard to develop your signature sound and tone when you're just constantly going through all these options. Now, let me back up for a second. I'm not saying by any means don't try different things, right? You know, you want to try different amps and different plugins, but you know, again, in today's modern world of music, I mean, we've constantly got new stuff thrown in our face. Here's the thing I'll tell you about a lot of the really, you know, famous classic guitar players, rock and metal players. a lot of these people still use the same equipment that they've been using in regards to amps and stuff like that. Sure, they may use some plugins from time to time, and I know some have switched over to things like the Kemper, the XFX, or whatever, but a lot of these guitar players, if you study them and if you look at their gear on stage, a lot of them are still playing the same stuff they played 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Some even longer than that. There's a lot of rock and metal bands that are just great that are still touring out there, which is just really awesome to hear and see. I know I'm kind of going on a rabbit trail here, but I just think that's great. They've developed their signature tone along with a specific set of instruments, of tools, a guitar amp, right? So they've developed that, and that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they love. And it doesn't matter what the latest and greatest gadget is, whether it's a new amp that just came out, a new amp sim, whatever, new plugin, you know, it doesn't matter because they've already like discovered their little magical, you know, arena of equipment there. So I just want to encourage you, again, I'm not saying don't try different stuff, but I want us to get away from, it's like, oh man, a new plugin was just released today. I'm gonna start using this now. You know what I mean? Because what you've already developed your tone with, your signature tone and sound with, or begin to develop it with, and you're happy with it, just because something new comes out doesn't mean you're what's considered outdated method now. It doesn't mean that's bad. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden started sucking. Get away from that fetish of always having to have new gear and just collecting gear. And look, guys, I'm guilty of this as well. Again, I'm kind of like preaching to myself here. I should do like Testament does and practice what I preach, which is an awesome freaking song, by the way. Man, seriously, I had that cassette way back in the day. Okay, back to this. So anyway, I'm guilty of that as well. I've been so guilty of, especially when it comes to plugins, you know, I'm just searching and searching for that perfect metal tone. Because look, it is a little challenge to find a really good metal tone with plugins. It's almost like you can find great other types of tones, but when it comes to metal, I think the bar is raised a bit, you know, in that specific tone. Now, I'm a little biased here because, you know, I'm a metalhead and as you are as well if you're watching my channel. But, you know, I've been guilty of this, you know, it's like, okay, well, this new plugin came out and now this one came out. I'm kind of tired of this one, so I'm going to check this one out. And then before you know it, you've downloaded like 5 different plugins, and then you end up just noodling, trying out different plugins. So it's kind of the same thing. This kind of ties in with that obsession over tone. That same obsession over gear will actually hinder you and prevent you from doing what you should be doing. And what is that? That's practice. That's actually focused practice, focused playing your instrument, going through, you know, certain licks that you're playing and writing or whatever, which we're going to get to that in a second. Actually, we're getting to that, I think. I forgot what number it is, but it's coming. Jason's third method for developing your signature tone: write your own riffs and licks, guys. I cannot stress this enough. If you're constantly always trying to learn other people's songs that other people wrote and not you, then in essence, you're kind of going after their sound. You're kind of going after their signature tone. Now, let me back up just a second here, because there's always two sides to this, right? So the other side is, if you are in a cover band and that's how you make your living, that's what you're doing, okay, I get it. You've got to learn those cover songs, and a lot of people that listen to cover bands, a lot of them, especially some of the vintage cover bands, they want to hear exactly how it was played. You know, why, I don't know. I would never want to go hear a cover band play the song exactly how it's played, because I'd rather hear that band's version of it. But that's just me. I know a lot of people that go see cover bands, they're like, okay, well, that Pink Floyd song, they left out that part, or they didn't play that part right, and they'll nitpick at it. So if that's your case, a little bit different scenario, but I would still encourage you to write your own riffs, even if you are playing covers and that's what you do. And I would say even if you're kind of like what we call a bedroom guitarist, you just play for a hobby and you're learning other songs, because it's fun, it's awesome, you know, and I'll tell you my story in a second here, but I still think it's important to spend time practicing writing your own riffs, your own licks, even going beyond what you learn in like books and lessons and stuff like that, even with theory. You know, some people get so caught up in theory, it's like, well, the theory is this, so it has to be this. But I encourage you to branch out away from that and write your own patterns, write your own riffs to practice, come up with your own licks. And a simple way to do that is to oftentimes take something that you've learned, right? So let's say Master of Puppets, for example. Let's say you take that riff, right? Now, what happens if you added maybe one note to that? Okay, what happens if you added maybe two notes to that? What happens if you play at a different speed, maybe slow it down and take away a note to make it a little bit more melodic sounding? You know, you just come up with all kind of possibilities, and once you start doing that, before you know it, you've like changed that entire riff to make it sound like something completely different than the song that you were actually playing. And what this does, guys, this is super important. What this does is it triggers something up here in your brain to, you know, to like, okay, I just made something. I just took something that already existed, and I created something new from that. So I think that really triggers that creativity, that artist part of your mind, of your brain there, to just flourish with new ideas. And I think once you start doing that, you'd be amazed at like how much other stuff just pops in your mind. Seriously, you'll be sitting down watching like Netflix or whatever, you know, and then all of a sudden you got this riff in your head, you know, so you stop what you're doing, you go grab your guitar and you write it down, and of course you record it, you know, break out your phone, record it, plug in studio, record it, whatever, because if you don't, you'll forget it. We're not elephants, right? Elephants never forget, but we do. Anyway, so that idea will be gone, but that's kind of a side note. But no, seriously guys, write your own riffs, focus on writing your own riffs, because it's really difficult to develop your own signature tone that sounds like you if you're constantly playing somebody else's stuff. Now, my quick story real quick, I was going to share with you guys, and I'll make this part fast. See, I started out learning Metallica songs. You know, that was the first metal band that I was introduced to, specifically the Master of Puppets and Justice for All cassettes. This was way back in the day, by the way. But yeah, I started out learning those. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, I learned everything note from note. No, I did not, you know, but I still started out learning those. And that's okay when you're beginning, when you're starting out playing guitar. And this is kind of the caveat here. You know, that's okay to start out learning other songs, because that's how you learn. But I just encourage you, even if you're just starting out, you know, you're watching this video and you're 6 months into it, or wanting to start learning, as soon as you possibly can, start branching out and writing your own riffs, because that's going to take your guitar playing from like way down here to way up here where you can't see because my camera's not going up that high. That's what it will do. And more importantly, writing your own stuff, because it's yours. Even if you take something that was already written and you kind of recreate it to make it your own thing, or play your own style of that, writing your own music, writing your own riffs and licks, that's going to be key to developing your own signature tone. I want to talk about number 5 right now so bad, because it's like the most monumental method and tip that I can give you here, but we can't skip number 4. Now, number 4 kind of ties in with what we just talked about, and I'm just going to harp on a little bit different piece of that. Don't try to sound like someone else. Sometimes and this is like a subconscious thing, you know, we hear our favorite guitarists, like I'm a huge Joe Satriani fan, just huge fan of Joe. I love his style, I love his technique. I'm a huge Kirk Hammett fan, because again, I started out listening to older Metallica stuff. He just does some really cool stuff on guitar. I'm a huge, you know, Jeff Loomis fan. The list goes on. I love Steve Vai. I love all these, a lot of these, you know, old school guitar players, you know, have been around for a while. Chris Broderick's one. So these guys, they have a certain way of playing, and it's real easy though, as we listen to these guitarists and even rhythm players alike, as we listen to the music, we love it so much, we kind of become borderline obsessed with it. And that's okay. Hey, we're metalheads, man. You know, I'm obsessed with metal music. I'll freely admit that, and I'm proud of that. But one of the problems that we have, and again, this is totally subconsciously most of the time, is we start to hear these guitarists and we start to compare ourselves to these guitarists, and maybe even guitarists we see right here on YouTube or on social media or whatever, and we start to want what they have, in a sense, talent-wise. So we start really trying to mimic everything that they do. this is not necessarily a bad thing. What I'm saying here, though, is don't let it get to that extreme level where you're just trying to replicate everything and every technique in the way that these other people play. If you write your own music, like we just talked about in method number 3 and tip number 3 here, but you also clear your conscience of other influences for that time and just let what's truly inside of you come out on your guitar. If you do that, then you're going to come up with cool stuff that's yours. Now, you'll also hear the influences that you love so much. And when I play a guitar solo, sometimes you can hear the Joe Satriani influence in that solo. Sometimes you can hear the Metallica riff, the Metallica style riffs, the thrash metal style riffs. You can hear that in my rhythms. It's not that I'm playing that music, but you can hear the influence, right? You're going to hear some of Delane and Nightwish and Amon Amarth and Arch Enemy, because I listen to a lot of that kind of stuff these days as well. So you're going to hear that naturally, and that's okay. But this is more of kind of like up here, like a mental thing. You kind of have to dig deep, and you kind of have to, for a time, for just that split second before you pick up your guitar, just sort of like erase your mind from any influence and just let what's inside truly come out. Let's get to tip number 5, method number 5, the final method for helping you develop your own signature tone. As a metal guitar player, and I get questions about this pretty much on a regular basis, is we sometimes want to know what that little hack is, what that little trick is, how somebody does something so fluidly or so fast. And oftentimes there's a specific technique that the guitar player is using to do that. However, just realize that that technique may not work for you. So method number 5, tip number 5 here is play what feels comfortable to you. This is crucial, guys. This is so important to developing your signature tone and not sounding like someone else. This is super important. Just play in the manner that feels comfortable to you. And one of the biggest examples, one of the greatest examples I can give you is how you hold your pick. I don't even know how I hold my pick. I could not tell you. Now, let's take one step back, look at that other side really quickly here. If you're a beginner guitar player, you do want to learn some basics. So I'm not saying don't learn the basics. There's some basic things that just kind of work, starting out of the gate. So I'm not saying try to do everything on your own at that point if you're just starting out. But most of us who have been playing for a substantial amount of time, at least a year, and some of us have been playing like 30 years. Geez, I'm old. But the things like holding a pick, though, it's a really good example. And I remember going through a period where I was having trouble playing some specific techniques. There were like lead guitar techniques, and I can't even remember what the technique was. It may have been sweep picking. It was something that I had not learned yet. It was many, many moons ago. But I was just like, kind of like, I don't know, borderline obsessed with how people hold their picks. And I wanted to know the secret. I'm like, there's got to be a secret way because I just can't seem to pull this off. Well, here's the reason I couldn't pull it off. I wasn't practicing that specific thing enough every day, an hour a day. And because sometimes some techniques are harder than others for certain guitar players, okay? Some people have tough time tapping where someone else may pull it off like, quickly. Sweep arpeggios, same thing. I personally, that's one technique I've kind of struggled with in my past years. Like, man, I just can't seem to get that down right. So the answer really is just to practice and do more of it more often. That's the answer. That's the answer no one wants to hear, but that's what it is. But what I will say, though, is when you're playing those patterns, whether it's tapping, whether it's sweep arpeggios, whether it's speed picking, or doing just really fast, blast metal riffs or alternate picking, whatever that is, what I want you to do is kind of take that step back, and I want you to just like almost alleviate what you've been taught and just put your hands on the guitar in the way that it feels the most comfortable. Hold your pick the way that it feels the most comfortable, the way that it feels the most natural to you, because that's going to be how you play better, for one, but it's also going to be how you develop your own signature tone. Like Chris Broderick, for example, I remember watching a video, and I think he had this pick at a workshop, at a guitar clinic he did, where I met him many years ago, and he had some weird looking pick that like wrapped around his thumb. And, you know, and of course, he's an amazing guitarist, but I know for me, because I've tried different things like that, and that just doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? That doesn't feel comfortable to me, but it obviously feels very comfortable to Chris. So, and other guitar players out there have their way of doing things. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. Okay, I'm not saying just like, I'm not saying put yourself in a box and say, okay, well, I'm doing it my way and I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm not saying that at all. You can definitely try different things, but at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you need to play in a manner that feels most comfortable and most natural to you. Because look, we're all individuals, you know. We're also different. Seriously, we are. But, you know, you're going to have a certain style of playing and a certain technique, and how you develop this technique is really depending on how much time you spend with your craft, how much time you spend playing guitar. You know, that's what this whole thing really all boils down to. So that is method number 5, or tip number 5. Play what feels comfortable to you. Now, a bonus tip I want to give you guys, and I've kind of touched on this throughout the tips that we've gone over already, but this is like super crucial, man. So a lot of times I get questions on, Jason, you know, how do you do this technique? How do you get better? How do you do this, blah, blah, blah. And I usually ask 2 questions back to them, and I'm leading into the bonus tip here. So my first question is, how often do you practice? And, you know, how much do you practice? And for the most part, people are like, well, I try to pick up my guitar every day, and that's good. You know, sometimes you can't do it quite every day, and that's fine. But, you know, as long as you're semi-consistent, you know, 4 or 5 days a week at, you know, a decent amount of time each day, you're good. But then the second question that I ask back is, after we cover that one, is, what do you practice when you sit down to play guitar or practice or whatever? What do you do? And a lot of times I don't get an answer back, or I get an answer back, well, I just play, man. I just, you know, play. I'm trying to learn this song and play this riff or whatever. Here's the problem, guys. If you really want to develop your signature tone, first of all, follow these methods, these 5 methods that we talked about. But our little bonus tip here is spend time with what I call focused practice sessions. And what this means is you need to plan these out. You need to say, okay, you know, and you don't have to make like some calendar. I mean, that's smart to do it that way. But let's say if you're going to jam right now, you want to play guitar, you got that itch. Like after you watch this video, you're like, man, I watched Jason's video, I want to go play guitar now. So make even a mental note, or even write it down. It's like, okay, let me think about this before I go pick up my guitar. I want to work on this, this, and this. Okay, 3 things, maybe just 1 thing. Actually, less is more when it comes to this, because if you focus on 1 thing each practice session and do that often, you're going to get much better at that technique a lot faster. So spend time with focused practice sessions, not just noodling. Noodling is almost death to becoming a really good guitar player. It's almost death to developing your signature tone. I would say the more serious you want to be about this, like if you really want to take your playing to the next level, and, you know, become from being good to great to excellent to master of puppets. If you really want to get awesome, you really have to sit down and you have to kind of like almost put your work boots on and go to work. You know, it's like, I'm gonna do this today. I'm gonna get awesome at this on guitar today, and this is what I'm gonna practice for the next 5 days until I nail it. Then I'll move on to something else, and I'll still integrate that same thing, you know, so I don't lose it. But you know, you set yourself a little schedule every time before you pick up your guitar. Just make a mental note. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do this and that, or I'm gonna do this, this and that, whatever, and focus on that. Focused practice. Now, on that note of focused practice, I actually have a free practice guide. There's a link in the description of this YouTube video, so you can go download that. I just ask for your email address, and once you send that to me, once you plug that in, press the I don't remember what the button says, but it says something, get my guide or something like that. You know, I'll send you that guide right away. And that guide will just give you some really awesome patterns to, you know, sit down and have focused practice sessions every single day. And when you get my guide, when you download that, one thing I want to tell you is, as you're going through those, you know, don't just practice what I'm giving you. We talked about this earlier as well. Remember, I talked about, you know, learning something. If you're learning something, expand on that and make it your own. So these are awesome starting points, awesome things to practice. So yeah, pick that guide up. Again, the link is in the description of this YouTube video. Guys, let me know if you have any questions at all on what we just went over on developing your signature tone or any of that stuff. You know, I know we touched on some kind of deep points here if you think about it as guitar players. And I know some of the stuff, especially those first two methods I gave you, those first two tips, you know, I know a little bit of that, it almost contradicts, you know, the way we want to go in, you know, having our signature tone. Because we're like, well, I got to have this, that, and that. But the thing is, the bottom line is, remember, your tone is in your hands. It's in the way you play. And that will only be developed by spending more time on your craft, on practicing, focused practice, like we talked about. Okay, so it's very, very much less to do about the gear and all this other stuff and the tools, and very much to do with you. Right, spending time on yourself, developing that signature tone. But again, guys, let me know if you have any questions about this. I'll be happy to chime in and answer. And a lot of times in the comments, we start some really cool conversations, you know, amongst everyone. It's kind of like our own little group there, so that's cool. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks for the support. Don't forget to get your free guide in the YouTube description here of this video. And until the next video, as always, keep it metal.